What unsolved mystery would you like to be explained in your lifetime? The escape from Alcatraz. I think they made it. Supposedly flowers were sent to their mother every Mother's Day after they escaped. Two tall women were seen at their mom's funeral and other hints suggest they are alive. I need to know what actually happened. I've done an extremely deep dive on this and am almost certain they survived. First of all, on average, 2 out of every 3 bodies in the San Francisco Bay are found, meaning it's very unlikely that all 3 of them died and no bodies were found, especially with the extensive search parties. Secondly, the police claimed that there were no robberies the night/morning of the robbery, but it was later discovered that a 1955 Chevrolet was reported stolen by 3 men. Also, the authorities claimed no raft was found, but a raft was found on Angel Island. The cover-up leads me to believe that the authorities withheld other evidence regarding their escape to prevent embarrassment. This information, paired with ops factoids, makes it all but certain in my mind. I'd love it if someone found Forrest Fenn's treasure. To explain, Forrest Fenn was a gentleman with some serious cash. He ended up having a cancer scare and being told he was terminal, so he buried some of his bonds/gold/etc. in a cache and wrote a poem with clues on how to find it, just like old-timey pirates or what have you. He ended up surviving the cancer and doesn't really give any hints on the treasure, except to say that he goes out like once every few years to make sure it's still buried in the same spot, and it always is. That's how he knows nobody has found it yet. At least 4 people have died looking for this. One was fairly recently, like a year ago or something, which was the first I'd heard about it. I think it is a bit irresponsible of him to keep it hidden after that has happened. The best he's offered is a reminder that he was already an old man when he buried it and it only took him a few hours in 2 trips to do it. Which means it's probably a lot closer to a road and a lot more obvious than people assume it would be. And I would repeat that for anyone reading this thread. Bear in mind that he was an old man when he hid it. Sure, if you happen to be out that way, it might be a fun day trip, but do not take any unnecessary risks. If it's out there, you're not going to have to Alex Honnold anything to find it, and no, that's not just what he'd want you to think. He literally was in his 70s when he hid it. It is not hiding in a place a 70-something would be unable to get to. Anyway, I'm sure it'll happen eventually. There are forums devoted to it and all, and again, he likely hid it in an actually fairly easy spot. Also, I don't know that it's true Fenn actually checks on it periodically. Especially now that he's in his 80s, and realistically, if someone did find it, they probably wouldn't announce it to anyone. Are we alone in the universe? I 100% believe in intelligent life. Would be nice to see it confirmed. Doesn't even have to be intelligent, just proof of life. Malaysia airline flight missing. Spoiler. Basically, the local government tried to hide the fact that the head pilot had some family troubles going on. But independent investigation has led them to believe the pilot killed all the passengers by suddenly taking the plane so high that the air pressure dropped and everyone gently fell asleep. Then at the perfect moment when the plane was being handed off between 2 nations' airspace, he turned the plane and let it fly in a random direction till it ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean. Uncertain if the pilot killed himself prior, or if that's when he died. Good explanation for consciousness would be awesome. Edit, a lot of people are replying with very philosophical approaches to consciousness, so I'd just like to clarify that I mean a completely scientific explanation for the fact that we are self-aware. I like the hypothesis that our consciousness emanates from the emergent behavior of our brains processing information. An analogy I like. A record player and a record. Music is not present in either medium, but when you play the record on the player you hear music. This makes a certain amount of sense for me and I don't have a better hypothesis. Interesting topic. Dark matter. Why the heck was it cancelled? It was so good. Just kidding, I want to know WTF dark matter is. I'm an astroparticle physicist working on dark matter. It's probably just an undiscovered particle that doesn't interact with light, with lowish mass but not so low that they travel at very close to the speed of light. The most likely candidates are generally variations on this theme. Which sounds boring tbh, since dark matter tends to have some pretty mystical properties in sci-fi. But it'd have huge implications on physics. The most exciting discovery emo would be that there are whole complex structures right here among us, that we can't detect only because their particles don't interact with our known particles, except the dark matter candidate particle, which would act as a bridge. Could you imagine alien life forms that aren't far away on some distant planet or alternate dimension, but that are living and breathing right next to, or even within us? Aliens that can't perceive us at all, only because we're made of entirely different sets of particles? How poetic. Realistically though, that's pretty unlikely, since from our observations of galaxy interactions it doesn't seem like dark matter interacts macroscopically in any way other than gravity. Compounded of course with the extreme unlikeness that aliens happen to be in the same tiny region of space as us. So best not to keep your hopes up on any invisible aliens. All the who, what, where, when, why and how Epstein's murder and who all the pedos are. I really hope that justice is served to everybody involved. To show that you can't get away with it no matter how powerful you are. Notice how the scores are hidden. The media is completely silent on it. It was suddenly announced a suicide without any evidence. All close associates of Epstein are either currently missing or recently passed away. Note, it's just a conspiracy, as the media, and people who have the capability to spread this message also conveniently were close to Epstein. The M Cave mystery. I remember hearing about this one and it still bothers me to this day. Basically some guy who was an avid hiker went back to visit a cave that he said was vibrating on his previous visit. He never came back from the trip and hasn't been seen since. He'd said some weird things before he went missing, he was suicidal. But his body hasn't been found. We can't just brush it off as suicide when there's no body to prove it. There's a few murderers and disappearances I'm curious about, but they've been brought up already, so I'll say, the Voynich manuscript. The materials used have been proven to be from the correct time period, but it's written in a still completely unknown language, and has yet to be even partly decoded. I guess, chances are, it's medieval medical/astronomical book. Also the Tamam Shud case. Unknown body found on an Australian beach. No sign of foul play or drowning, and had a strange coded message in his pocket. The body was found in 1948. He's never been identified. If I remember correctly, the labels had been removed from his clothes, and he didn't seem to be from the area. Yes to the Voynich manuscript. One thing that is important to consider with it that most people don't talk about is that it might not be decodable at all because it might be meaningless gibberish. At the time it was sold to the Pope, I think it was the Pope, there was a very good market for rare and mysterious manuscripts, so it might have just been a sham to get a quick buck. It also might have been done by someone who thought they were in some sort of trance state. Think of automatic writing or a written form of speaking in tongues. This is called glossolalia. Regardless, I am super interested. Edit, it wasn't the Pope. Thanks everyone for your awesome comments. Madeleine McCann. I used to be so convinced it was the parents, until I watched the recent Netflix documentary. Now I'm back to being unsure as hell. My main question I just want to know the answer to is, if it really wasn't them, why did the Cavadia dogs scent out Kate's shirt, behind the couch, and inside the closet? There's so much contradicting evidence, and the events of what happened afterwards with the Portuguese police make it all the more confusing. For Madeleine's sake as well as her siblings, I really hope the truth comes out. Edit, the documentary is The Disappearance of Madeleine McCann for those who are asking. There is some controversy about the reliability of cadaver dogs. Clearly they can be quite successful at finding actual human remains. When they indicate a spot and a body is found, we have validation that they are accurate. The idea that they can determine where a corpse has been is more problematic. How long does a body need to have been in that location? How long does the scent linger after the body has been moved? How long does a person need to be dead before the dog can detect the death scent? How do the dog's training and handler's perceptions factor into this? We don't have reliable, statistically sound data to answer any of these questions. Dogs can't tell us how certain they are about the scent they may have found, they just do what they are trained to do and what they get rewarded for. How sleep works. Edit, and more specifically, why we need it and eventually would die without it. In my rudimentary opinion, I'd say it's important to all brains because it's just the essential resting period to prevent overworking. I'd think of it like machinery, since the brain is a lot of electrical signals and tiny bits and pieces working together. If you run a machine on its max function every day, it's going to wear down pretty quick. But say this machine once turned off can't ever be turned back on. Well, the best solution would to set it to as low of a setting it can go so it's not off and is ready to go when you want to set it back on high. This is comparable to when the body slows down when going through sleep stages. Pulse and breathing slows, blood pressure lowers, muscles relax. The brain and body just has the highly complex factor that it's not a singular machine but really a bunch of machines making machines in a giant flesh factory. Being awake and conscious puts stress on all the tiny workers in our body because we're running on max output. Sleeping lets our brain and body relax more and lets the little workers catch up without stressing them. Plus, energy conservation somewhere probably. As organisms get bigger, they need more energy, and a way to safely conserve or allocate that energy elsewhere is to just have a resting period where stimuli, movement, and body processes are minimalized. The John Bennett Ramsey murder. There's a few murders I wish would be solved in my lifetime. The Black Dahlia and the disappearance of the Beaumont children are at the top of this list along with John Bennett and Maddie McCann, William Tyrrell. Also sad. TBH, a few years ago I would have said solving a cold case like that or the Madeleine McCann case were impossible, but with the way genetic stuff has been used to ID a lot of killers in some pretty notorious cold cases lately, there is a very real chance that these could be solved. All it takes is for one of the murderer's relatives to decide they want to take an ancestry DNA test and that's it for them. There's got to be some old-ass killers that sweat a little bit more every time a new story of a cold case being solved is celebrated by the media. So yeah, it's definitely a possibility.